Hello. I would like to thank everyone for coming. It's truly so moving to see so many people here who are committed to remembering the past and ensuring that it will never be forgotten. It's an honor for me to be part of such an important event and to be speaking in front of you today. My name is Leah Stein. I'm a Jewish student and a member of the student board of Chabad here at William and Mary. Chabad is an organization dedicated to outreach and education, focused on providing a safe and vibrant home away from home for Jewish students on campus and for the community at large. Our goal tonight is to bridge the past, present, and future, ensuring that the memories of Jewish pasts live on in the present and are passed down to the next generation. As a Jewish student on a college campus today, I feel that this work is more important than ever. Many of us feel the weight of history as the specter of hatred and anti-Semitism continues to haunt our lives, confronting us on our campuses, in our classrooms, and on social media. Many of us have experienced fear of expressing ourselves, and fear of being visibly Jewish. And many of us have felt pressure to make ourselves smaller and quieter in order to navigate the spaces that we find ourselves in. I believe that as we are presented with these challenges and fears and pressures, with the specter of the past collapsing into the present, it is more important than ever to ensure that this past is never forgotten. We are so honored to have Frank Shatz with us today, who will be sharing his story of courage, survival, resilience, and perseverance in the face of unimaginable circumstances. It is important that we honor his story and the memories of those who came before and who could not be with us today by having courage and resilience in our own lives. We can honor them by supporting each other, by being proud of our identities and strong in the face of adversity, by maintaining our values and practicing our traditions, and by spreading light in the midst of darkness. In the words of the late, great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, today, as we stand as if on a mountain peak, surveying the breathtaking landscape of Jewish history, we know this, that those who sought to destroy the people of the covenant gather dust in the museums of mankind, while Am Yisrael Chai, the people Israel, lives. Ancient Egypt is no more. The Moabites have long since disappeared. The Assyrians, Babylonians, Persian, Greeks, and Romans successively strode the stage of world dominion. Each empire played its part, set its lines, and each in turn has gone, but the Jews survive. Thank you again for being here tonight. It really means a lot to the Jewish students on campus to see your support. Next, I would like to introduce our rabbi, Rabbi Heber. Rabbi Heber is a spiritual leader and a mentor to many. He is the director of the Chabad of Williamsburg, Virginia, with his wife, Esther. During my time here at William and Mary, I have been fortunate enough to be welcomed into their home, and the community that I have found at Chabad has made all the difference to my experience on campus. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Heber to say a few words of gratitude.
Thank you. You did a great job. The attitude of gratitude. I would like to take a moment to thank God Almighty for allowing us tonight to witness and to hear firsthand the story of Frank Shatz, a 99-year-old Holocaust survivor. It is no secret that every year that passes, fewer and fewer are among us. And tonight is another reminder that we say, never forget, never again. I would also like to take a moment to thank some of the individuals and partners who have made tonight's event possible. The Judaica Studies at William and Mary, Professor Rashkover, the Virginia Holocaust Museum located in Richmond, Virginia. If you haven't been there, you should definitely go check it out. The director is Sam Asher. The Holocaust Committee of the Federation of Tidewater, Alka Mudnik, I think she's here tonight with us. Thank you for your support. The ICC, the Israel Campus Coalition, Zoe on campus, the William and Mary Center for Student Diversity, Mrs. Williams, I believe she's here too tonight. Thank you. The organization Stand With Us and AEPI at William and Mary. And without further ado, I would like to call up a good friend. And like Frank Shatz says, Rabbi, you're a propagandist. And yes, tonight is about propaganda. Tonight is really all about us hearing the story, taking it to heart, and asking ourselves, what actions am I going to take to ensure a brighter future for our children and future generation? Without further ado, Frank Shatz. Is it on?
It is a great honor to see so many people, local people here. I cannot say it can happen only in America. As you have heard, I am 99 years old and still ticking. As you know, I survived Hitler and survived Stalin. And I am here, and they are turning over in their grave that I am still around and bear witness. I assume you have already noticed that I am talking with an accent. Some years ago, I interviewed a Senator Sam Young, Nunn from Georgia. And here in Williamsburg, and in the middle of the interview, he turned to me and said, you know, you are speaking with an East European accent, and I think that your native language must have been Czech or Hungarian. Am I right? And I said, yes, Senator, you are right. But you know that you are talking also with a deep Southern accent. He was laughing, and since then, whenever I met him, he right away recognized me. So sometimes to have an accent is not a bad thing. Now, let me tell you my story. It is why I am here. I was born in democratic Czechoslovakia after the First World War. My family, and I was born on the Danube River in a small border town between Czechoslovakia, democratic Czechoslovakia, and Hungary, what was already a semi-fascist state and a close ally of Nazi Germany. Our life in Czechoslovakia and how I grew up was a prosperous life. My father owned several businesses, and we had a good life. But everything, it doesn't work.
This is better.
But everything changed in 1938 when Hitler and British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain signed the Munich Agreement. Democratic Czechoslovakia was dismembered, and the territory where we lived in southern Slovakia was incorporated into semi-fascist Hungary. And at that time, Hungary already had anti-Jewish laws on the book. A Jewish student, no matter how talented they were, only 6% were allowed to attend universities. No Jew could hold a public office. So it was, but interestingly, my family was not affected by the anti-Jewish laws because my father was a military officer in the Austrian-Hungarian army during the First World War, and because of it, the anti-Jewish laws didn't apply to us. So I was able to attend a Catholic gymnasium, a preparatory school for college, and I didn't felt in any way discriminated, but it all changed in, it was March 1944 when the German army invaded Hungary because Hitler was afraid that Hungary will join, the Allies will split from Germany, so they invaded Hungary. And the tragedy of the Hungarian Jews started because up till now, while Jews from all over Europe were shipped to the Auschwitz extermination camp, no transport left Hungary. They were anti-Jewish laws, but the Hungarian Jews still were protected in a way that they weren't sent to Auschwitz. But in October 15, 1944, everything changed because the Germans kidnapped the regent of Hungary, Admiral Horthy, and installed extreme fascist government in Hungary. And Eichmann descended on Hungary with his gang, and the deportation of the Jews to Auschwitz started. In fact, more than 400,000 Hungarian Jews were gassed in every day. A shipment of 12,000 Jews left Hungary, and it was only 12,000 because it was the capacity of Auschwitz gas chambers to liquidate so many people. So interestingly, after Germany invaded Hungary, for a few months still my family was protected from the anti-Jewish laws. But suddenly it all changed, and I was called up to serve, we thought, in the Hungarian army. But when I arrived to the base, the commandant tore up my papers, and next day I was shipped in a cattle car to the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania, but before belonged to Romania and now again is Romania, to build a railroad line over the rugged Carpathian Mountains for the German army. It was a back-breaking job on starvation diet, and I would have been killed in a short time because I never was robust. But I heard that the commandant of the slave labor camp needed a groom for his horses. At that time, I didn't have cars. I have horses and horse-driven carriages. So I, as a kid, had my own pony, and I learned how to take care of horses. So I took myself into the job of being the commandant groom. And I also was his driver and took him often to a Romanian village where I befriended the Romanian peasant, and they gave me some extra food and also some old clothing, what turned out to be saved me when I escaped. I had civilian clothes hidden under my slave labor uniform, but it came later. So what happened was, and I remember it was in June when it was a landing in Normandy, and from the Romanian peasant, I heard, of course we didn't have any radio or nothing, heard that what happened, And when I came back from one of my visits with the command, so I spread it around the slave labor camps that the Allied managed to land in Normandy. So it was a secret celebration all over. Like I said, I survived, but people were dying around me because to build this railroad line was such a terrible job that people who couldn't fulfill their quota, daily quota of work, were or beaten to death, or when a heavy railroad fall on their feet and it broke the leg, they were useless, so they were shot. So it was a terrible time to live. But the Red Army was moving up through the Balkans, and the Germans were forced to evacuate the slave labor camp, and we were marched toward the heartland of Hungary, toward Budapest, day and night, and sometimes they put us into a cattle car, and where finally we arrived to Budapest, and that we, or group of slave laborers, were saved from being sent to Auschwitz. The reason was that we were specialists in repairing railroad trucks that were bombed by Allied bombers. So it is where they put us when we arrived. In October the 15th, it was the day when the ultra fascist group took over the government in Hungary. And when we arrived, it was such a confusion that they opened the doors and the guard disappeared. Hungarian and German guard disappeared. And of course, we didn't know what is happening. And it was a short window when we could have escaped, but we didn't realize what is happening. And a few hours later, everything went back to normal, like before. We were slave laborers again. And they billeted us in an abandoned brickyard, and next day they put us to work on the railroad line, what was constantly bombed by Allied forces. Like at that time it was Flying Fortress, the B-17 American bombers and British Lanchesters, and they tried to destroy the only remaining railroad bridge spanning the Danube River. But they never could hit it because it was so heavily defended that they had to fly too high. The bomb landed all over us where we were working, and whenever there was a raid, they chased us into the adjoining cornfield to hide, not because they wanted to save us, but save themselves. And at one time, when they chased us into, I just didn't come out from the cornfield and waited there, and disposed of my slave labor uniform. We had yellow unbound and yellow all sewn in, so it was not easy to get rid of it. And put on the old clothing what the Romanian peasant gave me, and crawled out from the cornfield. And it was not too far, a tram station, and I boarded a tram toward Budapest, toward downtown Budapest. I lived in Budapest before, and I was speaking perfect Hungarian language, so I didn't have any IDs, I didn't have money, but I thought I can get away with it. And I was very careful not to avoid any militant or police patrols or just to stay away from any uniformed person. By arriving into the heart of Budapest, I jumped off the tram before it stopped at a station. And the reason was I wanted to make sure that nobody is following me. So the tram was still moving when I jumped off. And by absolute miracle, I almost jumped into the arm of my brother-in-law, who escaped a few months before from a slave labor camp in Bor, Yugoslavia. It was the most notorious copper mine where people were dying like fleas. And he survived because he was originally from Serbia and was speaking Serb and also German and Hungarian. So he survived like I, as a groom, he survived and escaped and joined the anti-Nazi underground in Budapest. So when we couldn't believe that we see each other, because I have no idea that he is still alive and the same about you. And he took me to one of the safe houses set up by Raoul Wallenberg, the legendary Swedish diplomat who saved tens of thousands of Jews from the gas chamber. I stayed only for a few days in the safe house. I was furnished by fake IDs and money, and I joined also the Zionist-led underground. And I needed a place, a safe place to be, and I thought the best thing will be if I marched into the headquarters of the district leader of the Nyilas, the most extreme fascist party in Hungary, and it is what I did. I introduced myself as I escaped from the Red Army, and I am a good party member, and I need a roof over my head, I need a job. And he looked at me and said, by any chance, aren't you a Jewish boy? And I said, are you crazy? I will be here if I am a Jew. And I said, do you want to see that I am not a Jew? And started to unbutton my fly. and because I knew that the Hungarian men were terrified to be accused to be homosexuals, because the Germans would have shipped them to a concentration. And we didn't have a zip at that time on a fly, only buttons. So I started, and he said, no, it's not necessary, just... So anyway, I was, and he gave me, were arranged that I get a room in a luxurious apartment that belonged to a very wealthy Jewish family. And so I divided it that two rooms. So I got a room in this luxurious apartment and a job in a small factory that was making aerial timers for aerial bombs. So every bomb has to have a timer. And they made me quality controller there. So whenever I had the chance, I sabotaged it. So many of the bombs just didn't work. And anyway, I stayed there, and I joined the Zionist-led underground, and I became an aide to Otto Komoly, who was also a Hungarian officer during the First World War, and a very prominent man. And he was the head of the rescue, he was the head of the Zionist organization of Hungary. And in addition, he was the head of the Aid and Rescue Committee. It meant first he was aiding Jews who escaped from Slovakia and Poland and came to Hungary, because at that time Hungary was still a safe place to hide. And so I became an aide to him, and my job was mostly to deliver bribes to high-ranking Hungarian fascist officers, because they all were hungry for gold Napoleon coins. And sometimes, thanks God that they are so greedy. This way we can bribe them. And the other thing, I was delivering also fake papers, false IDs for Jews in hiding. I could do it because, first of all, I looked like a Hungarian young man, and I had a cap of a fascist Hungarian youth organization. So I said I am a member of it. And so with this one, I can get away. So I then, to deliver those Napoleons and fake papers, I always carried a 2-pound paper bag what was filled up with white flour. So I hide the gold coins and the fake papers in the bottom of the flour. And when I was stopped by militiamen and asked why I am carrying, I said, I am delivering food from a Christian charity organization to some needy people. And one of the close calls what I had, I was delivering fake papers in this paper bag to 2 young Jews who were hiding in the apartment of an older Christian couple. And when I wanted to ring the bell, the door from the next door apartment opened up, and a big guy in a fascist uniform came out and said, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And I showed him the paper bag, and I said, I am bringing extra food to those people here from a Christian charity. And I said, if your family needs some extra help, I can ask this charity to send you some. Do you want me? He turned around and closed the door behind him, and so I got away with it. And 2 young people get their papers, and they managed to get out. But I don't know if they survived the Holocaust or not. But I did my duty. So anyway, just to explain the tenure of the times. So I needed also at one time to doctor my fake IDs, because first I was 16 years old, because if you were 16, you were drafted into the Hungarian army, and after a week training sent to the front as a cannon fodder. So I didn't want to die for the Hungarian regime. And I needed to change the birthday date on my fake papers. And there was a sanatorium in Budapest that turned out to be a hiding place for Jews. And one of the laboratory assistants was a member of the underground. And I gave her my papers, and they put a chemical on it, and the chemical had to dry about half an hour, and I could write in the new date only. And they were doing it, and it was, I get uneasy. And I said, you know what, give it back to me, and I will wait till it dries, and I will write it in. And left. And I was maybe 100, 200 feet away when an army truck stopped in front of the sanatorium, and a group of Milash, fascist militia, all armed and led by a Dominican monk who had his monk outfit on him and the gun on his shoulder, and they ran invaded the sanatorium, and next day they massacred every Jew who was in the sanatorium. About 70 people were massacred. So if I would have stayed maybe 10 minutes longer, I would have been one of the victims. So it was again a close call. And now, I don't know how long I am talking now. It still is okay. The last few, they were constant. You didn't have to make really crucial decisions every hour, that you have to make it every few minutes, because you never know what danger you run into it. The last few weeks before Budapest was liberated by the Red Army, I couldn't go to this factory because it was, let's go back a bit, because what happened was, I made a point to be back at 5. Then I'm a little bit myself confused at what happened. So I didn't felt anymore that if I rented a room or so, I would be safe. But I heard there were a woman whose son was the commander of one of the militias was hunting Jews, that she was a superintendent on a big apartment house, and she rented out the beds to working men, Hungarian working men. So I rented a bed in a room where 4 other Hungarian working men were renting also a bed. And I thought that it will be the safest place, again, that nobody will think that the Jew will look for shelter in this potential killer. And it is where I stayed the last few weeks before the end of the war. But during the day, when I couldn't go to the factory because it was such a bombardment, I stayed with a friend in the basement of there. Everybody at that time lived in a basement because it was constant bombing. And one day, for some reason, I usually, 5 o'clock, I was back in my bed. But this particular day, I lingered on and came later. And when I arrived, I entered the big door to the apartment house, it was absolute bedlam there. A Russian aerial bomb hit the apartment where I had my bed, and hit the whole apartment was in shambles. The 4 men were already at home, and they were dead. Everything was destroyed, and the woman's son, who was blinded, also what was a good thing, and everything was. I had a suitcase, as you cannot call it a suit, but a box where my little clothing, what I had, was under the bed, and everything was destroyed in this room. Only my paper box with my belongings under the bed was intact. So I took it and went looking to rent the other bed somewhere. And I did, and it was just before, very shortly before Budapest was liberated. So just to make a little good story, when the Russian finally came, first of all, Budapest was defended by the SS like Stalingrad. Every house was a fortress. They were defending it. And the Russians got smart, and instead of coming and getting into those houses from the front door, they came underground behind the Nazis. And they did so because I learned that there was a law in Budapest that every apartment house had to have a piece of the wall from one basement to the next apartment basement, made it so that it should be easy to break through. If one apartment house was bombed, they could escape to the next one. And a Russian squad bombs into our basement, and the Russian wanted to break through this wall, but the wall didn't give, and they got mad, and they were pointing their automatic weapons at us, and of course the Hungarian didn't speak a word Russian, but my Russian wasn't too good, but I speak Czech, and if you speak one Slavic language, you can understand and communicate in the others most, and I learned some Russian before. So I said, what is it what you want? So they told me, but I couldn't break through. So vice sergeant who was in charge of this team said, you go up, and it was in January, it was cold and dark and everything, and it was at night. And you go upstairs on the street rather and go run to the next apartment house and break through from the other side. And it was not a request, it was an order, and he was pointing his weapon at me. So I did, and really it was only a tracer bullet, but you could see, and I crawled by the wall to the next door, and the door was open. And I got in, and suddenly I heard saying, "Spion, spion." It means in Russian, spy, spy. And I said, I am not a spy, I am a Jew. and suddenly somebody from the back said, Yakov, idi sura. It is Yakov, come here. and said to him, "Hey, go and ask him something in Hebrew, if he is really a Jew." And he asked me to say a prayer, and I was a lapsed Jew. As a child, I remember something, but I never went to a synagogue. But when you are in a trouble like that, your memory comes back. And I started to recite Shema Yisrael. It is the Jewish prayer and so he came to me, Yaakov, and hugged me and said to his camera, "He's okay, he is a Jew," and went into his pocket and took a piece of sausage and bread and gave it to me. So I didn't go down in the basement to break through. I went back to my own basement and told the Russians that it's safe, it's already occupied by a different Russian group. So I left, and a few hours later, the sergeant came back with a full sack of flour. It was worth in a starving Budapest more than gold. And he gave it to me and said, "It is for reward what I did for them." So I distributed the flour between my neighbors, and a few days later, I became a translator for the general who was in charge of this division, what was liberating this part of Budapest, and I was his. So I got from here a piece of paper saying that I can enter the headquarters anytime. And many of the Russian soldiers couldn't read, but they were very impressed by big stamps, and this paper had a lot of big stamps, so it serves me as a passport. I could travel anywhere but was occupied by the Russian. It was accepted as a passport. So then my hometown on the Danube River was liberated. A few weeks later, I returned to my hometown. Only my father was alive, and later my brother, who was a big guy, but came back like a skeleton, he came back. My mother, my sister, and her 3-month-old baby, and I were gassed and selected by Dr. Mandela when they arrived in Auschwitz, and more than a dozen of my close family members all perished in concentration camp. After a few weeks or months, I went back to Prague, resumed my studies, and finally became a foreign correspondent for the Hungarian newspapers. And a few years later, I had to escape from communist Czechoslovakia because I joined there the anti-communist underground and helped people to escape again to the West. So history repeats itself, and now I am here. Anybody has questions?
You'll sit down, and Andrew has questions that people asked, okay? Andrew, come. So you sit down, and you sit down, and take the mic with you.
Okay.
Can I take this off? Okay, go.
Wow. Frank, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know I can speak on behalf of everyone here saying how deeply moved and inspired we are by your resilience. You're truly a living treasure. Like you said just 2.5 weeks ago, you celebrated 99. You mentioned you're still kicking, but you're doing a lot more than that. You're bringing light to all of us, so thank you deeply. I asked on social media for some questions, and I asked on social media for some questions, and the first question I got is that you've been through so much, you've seen atrocities with your own eyes. You mentioned dozen or so family members perished, and I'm so sorry for your loss. But what keeps you going with such purpose and energy to still be here today and in the following years after the war, giving so much light back to the world?
I suppose it is an attitude. All my life, I was an optimist. I believe that things will get better, and that you have to have your share to make it better. So I have to say I never had a nightmare after the war. I often watch documentaries about what happened during the Holocaust, and I am deeply moved by it, but I never have a nightmare. And the reason, I suppose, is that I never hurt anybody if I couldn't help. So I don't feel guilty. I never felt guilty that I survived, because when I look back, I helped to save a lot of lives, and it is just a human attitude that keeps you going. So I have no prescription what others should do, but it is what kept my purpose in life now is that to bear witness, and that it should never happen, because in fact the Jews are the canaries in the coal mine. First, they are the ones who are persecuted and killed, and subsequently, when it happens, it always are other first minorities who are hunted and killed and persecuted, but in the end, the whole population loses freedom, and it will take a long time till they can get it back. It happened after the war, after the Second World War. It happened when the Soviet Union broke up, and I hope it will never happen again. But it was Primo Levi, a famous Italian writer and a survivor of the Holocaust, who said, if it happened once, it can happen again. So it's a lesson for everybody, Jews, no Jews, minorities, but even the majority in a country who doesn't stand up for freedom and freedom of the press, and it can happen again. So it is a message what I try to spread. It is my mission now in life, because I am really the last generation who could say I witnessed it, I was there. After us, there will be museums, there will be movies, books, but nobody who can say, I witnessed it. After the war, for 40 years, I never talked about my experience during the Holocaust. But when the Holocaust deniers came out from the woodwork, suddenly I felt I have a duty and a responsibility to speak out, and started to have public speeches and write about it. And I think so it makes an impact. If I could have now attracted such a crowd like you are, and sympathetic crowd, I feel good about it. It fulfills my purpose to bear witness.
I think your optimism is truly a gift that you have, and thank you for using that strength to look out for all of us and speaking your truth so it's never forgotten and does not happen again. I have a second question. You already gave a great message to the Jewish people or to anybody, but specifically someone asks if there is a concise message for the entire Jewish people around the world. If you could give one message, what would that be?
Is to be a proud Jew. It never works when you keep quiet and wait till somebody else will speak up. There is so much to be proud of, to be Jews. I am not a religious Jew. I don't go to synagogue, but I am a very proud Jew. So what I am saying is that you have to stood by your conviction and not to be afraid, because being a coward never gets you anywhere.
Can I ask another? Okay. So is it okay I can ask my own question, Frank? Hearing your story, there's two traits that really stood out to me, among others, but two that I particularly love about you. And that is creativity and bravery that you carried with you. Like when you had to prove your Jewishness in the unconventional way that involved the fly, when you were brave, like messing with the sabotaging weapons from the Axis, when you were giving illegal papers to people and food, and you had to be kind of undercover at times, passing off as Hungarian. Like all these stories, it's not just, there's resilience there, but even on top of that, you had to be creative. You had to think fast, and you had to be brave. So my question is, when we feel fear, how do we overcome that in these crucial moments where it's either life or death for us, or in your case, for other people that you were helping? How do we overcome that fear? And did you feel fear?
To be honest, I never thought this way. Just to illustrate a little thing, I had a fake paper again that I am an employee of the International Red Cross from Switzerland. So it meant that I had a right to inspect the houses where Jewish orphans were housed during the Holocaust, during the last months of the war. And it was one house where about 40 Jewish orphans were housed. And I got direction from this Mr. Komoy, the head of the rescue organ, to go and check on this house if the kids are okay. And I went there and was, and each of those houses had a a sign, like an official sign, and it is what was the Hungarian government, what was bribed by those Napoleons, gave it, that you displayed it on the house, that it is under the protection of the International Red Cross, and nobody should bother it. And when I arrived to this house, there was a group of about 4 or 5 this fascist militiamen with weapons and everything, who wanted to get into the house, and they were talking, of course, in Hungarian, that to take those kids first to the ghetto, and from the ghetto to the Auschwitz. And when I arrived and saw them there, and I don't know what made me. You are asking me, and I cannot give an answer. But I went to those guys and said, I am an employee of the International Red Cross, and you can see this house is under their protection, and you should not enter it. And they were, oh, who cares what? And I said, if you don't leave, I will right away call the Interior Ministry and ask for help that I should send here. And I just bluffed. And they were, and the leader of the group said to the other guy, it's not worth it. Let's leave it. We just are causing trouble. And I left. Now, this particular group of orphan children survived. It was, the house was there after Budapest was liberated. So I have to say, it made me feel good. It still makes me feel good. But why I did it and how I did it, I don't know.
So to help us conclude, we have a special presentation. Rabbi Mendy.
So Frank mentioned that you don't go to synagogue, but when they asked him what it means, prove that you're Jewish, and at a time of adversity, he remembered the Shema Yisrael. So I'm just going to, for about 40 seconds, give a pitch what Shema Yisrael is. When Jews were killed throughout history, the last prayer that they have said before death, and many have not succeeded saying that prayer, was the Shema Yisrael. So I think, to honor Frank and all of his friends that were not here, let's say the prayer together. Perhaps for some will be the first time we will do it. And the way it's done is as follows. If you're a righty, you raise your right hand. And if you're a lefty, you raise your left hand and you cover your eyes. And we will say 5 words together. Repeat after me in Hebrew, word for word. Are you ready? You remember it from Hebrew school, right?
Yeah.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And we will conclude with a special presentation. The New York Times has described the late leader Rabbi Menachem Schneerson as the most influential rabbi in modern history. His gift to the world of goodness and kindness, especially after the Holocaust, was something out of the ordinary. Since 1978, with President Jimmy Carter, every single U.S. president has proclaimed the Lubavitch Rebbe's birthday on Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, Education Day USA. Since then, every president, many localities, and government officials have proclaimed that day, and we are honored to have with us, representing the mayor and city council, Vice Mayor Pat, to come and proclaim the 11th day of Nisan, Education Day USA.
Thank you, Rabbi. Mr. Shatz, good to see you again. Thank you for inspiring us all and thank you for the positive impact that you've had on the greater Williamsburg community. It's an honor to be here with you tonight. It's also an honor to be here this evening to present this proclamation on behalf of the city of Williamsburg. Whereas the basis for the continuity of any society is education, and in the city of Williamsburg, Virginia, the education of our youth is a priority. And whereas in order to achieve its highest goals, education must not only impart knowledge, but also teach the students how to live, forming and strengthening their moral character to make a better life for themselves as individuals and for our society as a whole, imparting moral and ethical values that have been the bedrock of society since the dawn of civilization, including the values known as the 7 Noahide laws. And whereas a global spiritual leader and leading advocate for the advancement of education, the Rabbi Menachem Schneerson of righteous memory stressed that a moral and ethical education empowers every individual to develop their full potential, making the world a better place. And whereas such an education can nurture the unity of diverse people through encouraging increased acts of goodness and kindness, imbued with the awareness that even a single positive act of an individual can change the world and usher in an era of global peace. And whereas April 9, 2025 will mark 123 years since the Rebbe's birth, and this year marks the 75th anniversary of his leadership of Chabad Lubavitch movement. Chabad is an acronym of 3 Hebrew words for wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. The name Lubavitch comes from the city which served as the movement's headquarters for over a century and means city of love. All of the ethical values which inform our civilization, none is more important than love. Love of wisdom, love of our fellow man, and love of our Creator. These values have guided the Chabad Lubavitch movement throughout its history and are the essence of education at its best. And we should be certain to pass on the prestigious heritage to all young Americans. And whereas Education and Sharing Day is observed each year on the Rebbe's birthday in recognition of his outstanding and lasting contributions toward the improvement of education, morality, and acts of charity around the world, a day to pause and reflect on our responsibility to ensure our youth have the foundation necessary to live lives rich in purpose and fulfillment through good works and service. Now, therefore, on behalf of Mayor Douglas G. Pons, Mayor, I, Pat Dent, Vice Mayor for the City of Williamsburg, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, April 9th, 2025 to be Education and Sharing Day in the City of Williamsburg and call upon everyone to work together to create better, brighter, and more promising future for all, signed by Douglas G. Pons, Mayor. Thank you.
Mitchell. Excellent. You got to conclude? Okay, thank you so much. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And thanks to the whole City Council for all that you do for us. Before we wrap up, I want to leave with a brief idea that we can take with us. In the Torah, when the world was full of darkness and turmoil in the times of Noah, God instructed his most righteous man to build an ark. It was a vessel of godliness in chaotic times. And one interpretation of this story is that we can build our own ark as a space of warmth and kindness in tumultuous eras. So tonight, we are giving out small arks as tzedakah boxes or charity boxes. We strongly encourage to put in a coin every single day except Shabbos, and when full, donate it to an organization of your choice. With acts of routine kindness, an acronym spelling ark, that is how we honor Frank's legacy. He showed us that he can have optimism in the most difficult times possibly imaginable. And he did that because he knew he was doing the right thing. So if he could keep optimism, doing the right thing in the worst times possible, then I think we can too. And that's how we keep his story alive. So thank you, everyone, for coming. We're now going to ask anyone who wishes to come up and take a picture with Frank. And please form a line, and we'll have to move the line pretty quick because there's probably a lot of people that would like to take that picture.
And also there's arcs outside. Everyone, please take
Yeah, and the arcs are outside. Upon leaving, you can grab one. Thank you.